Hey guys, it's Rick Ginn, and you're on Flip with Rick. Today we're talking all about repair cost. And honestly, I almost feel guilty for shooting this video, but there are some basics you have to understand when it comes to wholesaling, especially the fact that we deal with houses that need a lot of attention. In fact, I'm willing to say most of the houses we deal with need some sort of rehab. Let's face it, it's the main reason why they're calling us. I want you to understand is you never want to fear rehab because in the sense of when it comes to real estate, it's actually a good thing because it creates opportunities for you and it creates opportunities for me. So what I want to do today is we can kind of deep dive and talk about how to simply calculate repair cost without being a bona fide general contractor. Now, I got a lot of experience doing this, but I'm going to be honest with you. Some of you guys go way too deep in the weeds on this, and you have to understand I need you to be a wholesaler. That's where your specialty is. What does that mean exactly? You have to specialize in marketing to motivated sellers. Nowhere in this did I say you need to become an expert on figuring out repair costs. You just have to understand the basic rules for engagement and you can classify it. See, most of you are trying to get the perfect rehab number. You just need a good guesstimate so you can calculate your numbers. It's never going to be perfect. It won't even be close to perfect. So if you know that going into it, it's much easier to calculate it. So let's just go through a crash course on, hey, Rick, how do I figure out and easily find the repair cost for any property I want to make an offer on? So let me break this down and make it super simple for you where anybody can understand this. Now, the number one rule you need to understand when it comes to any house that needs repair costs. You ready? Size matters. The bigger the house, the more it's going to cost. Now, the biggest precursor to that is figure out what it needs under the square footage under the roof, meaning under the air. So we call it square footage under air. And when you do this, you do a calculation because every square foot that's under air, there is a fixed minimum cost to do a rehab on it, depending on the size of it. So you've got to understand the difference between doing a 4,000 square foot house and a 900 square foot house is huge. Why? The flooring is going to be more square footage. The painting is going to require more paint. It requires more effort. And for that reason, understanding size is probably one of the biggest determining factor in how much the repair costs are going to cost. So the first thing you need to do whenever you do this calculation is figure out how many square feet under air the property is. It's really simple. Now, you can take your seller's story. Sellers like to fabricate these numbers. A lot of times they'll include the garage, the patio, the pool deck. To get the accurate number, go to your property appraiser site and look up what the square footage under air is. Now, don't mix this up with the total square footage. That is going to be the garage, the porch, any type of decking area, sometimes a patio, a pool area. That's total square footage. And that's a different calculation. For simplicity today, we want to calculate what is under air. So that is the one number you must know when you do these calculations. So size is huge. And guys, we always talk about the, let me put it on here. Everyone's so scared of rehab because of this. The money. Guys, this is where the opportunity is found. So if we know the entire formula is going to be based on the size of the property, here's the two biggest challenges you have to deal when you deal with figuring out rehab costs. Number one is the money. That's what we're going to answer today. We're going to go through an exercise and do the whole thing. It's easy. And if you've never done this before, I'm going to teach you how to do it. It's not that hard. Now, most of you are like, oh man, money's the biggest hindrance. It's the biggest problem with it. It's actually not. Money is actually the easiest part of it because you're going to bring a cash buyer to solve that. Here's the biggest challenge. Here's the biggest hindrance on every project that needs rehab. You ready? It's time. And why am I telling you this? Because it's important you understand that the seller understands roughly the cost, but they don't know how to price it in based on the time. And let me kind of explain this to you. The more money it costs, the more time it's going to cost. Most of you think that the money is the biggest problem. It's actually not. It's just a number. And if you just had to write a check, it was 10, 20, 30, $50,000, that would be simple for most investors. But here's where most cash buyers are going to calculate it. A cash buyer goes, okay, that takes $50,000 to rehab. You come up with that number. How much time is it going to take? So not only do you need to know what the square footage under air is, total square footage would be helpful too, is you need to know how much time the rehab's going to take. Why? Because the more time it takes, the more money it's going to cost. How can that be? Well, a simple factor of holding cost. Most people that buy these projects, they're using other people's money, either soft money or hard money, or sometimes the bank's money. And there is a time cost on it every single day. So if a project takes 6 months versus a project that takes 30 days, you got to understand that time is going to cost money. And you have to factor in what those holding costs are and what people's patience are. And remember, when it comes to rehabbing any type of property, time is your enemy, because the more time it takes, the more risk that market conditions will severely affect the outcome of the price. And if you understand that, you understand how that works. So most of you are so freaked out about money on this. In fact, you've got to figure out the time, because honestly, I find time more of a liability than the financial cost of repairing a property, because I know we're guesstimating on the monies, but when it comes to time, I've seen 60 days repairs turn into 1 and 2 year repairs. Devastating effects. Sometimes adding an extra $25,000, $35,000, $40,000 to an average rehab on a property, which destroys most fix and flippers' budgets. Now, let's jump over on the seller side. Sellers only do this. They don't consider time. They only consider the money. So in a lot of, say a property is worth $300,000 and needs $50,000 in repairs. Here the seller goes, well, then I just sell it to you for $250,000. No, you can't do that. You can never do that. You can't just minus off the number, guys, because you have to factor in the time. If you don't factor in the time, you're not going to leave enough of a spread to your cash buyer can actually make money. Because I promise you this, the cash buyer is going to factor in not only how much the rehab's going to cost, but they're going to factor in the time. If you understand that, you get it. Time to me is more expensive than money. You can always get money back. You can't get back time. And most people overlook this when they try to figure out rehab. So we've really made things as simple as we humanly possibly can at Flip with Rick. Me and Zach have designed a basic chart. Why? Because I don't want you to be a general contractor, but you need to know how to price stuff. Remember, the lower the price you get, the more options you have in wholesaling. And usually the better off you're going to do. If you constantly chase a yes, you get it under contract, and then you find out you can't move it, you waste a lot of your time and you wind up working for free, and you're going to drive yourself out of the business. But we don't teach that. So I am going to give you a flash chart. So I want you to understand, before I put the chart up there, you've got to understand the difference between a regular rehab and a full rehab. I only classify in 3 areas in rehab. And let me tell you why. Because the first thing we're going to do is tackle time. The money, I'm going to show you a chart. It's actually very easy. So if we have a light rehab, my absolute favorite. Why do I like light rehabs? What do I consider a light rehab? Put in the comments and tell me what you guys consider a light rehab. How much time is a light rehab? Because we have to use words like this to describe to our cash buyers the seller contracts. They want to know if it's light, a medium, or a heavy rehab. Now, heavy's worst case scenario. Light is where I find most people get like very gray in this area. So guys, let me know what you think a light rehab is. How much time should a light rehab take to do? Now, most of your wholesale deals are going to fall in this light rehab. And if you cherry pick your deals and you want to take one down, you've got to make sure it's in this qualification of light. Why? Not only is it significantly cheaper to get it done, the reality is the time is way, way down. Remember, I told you time is your absolute biggest enemy when it comes to wholesaling. So Jonathan says 2 to 3 weeks. That's not a bad guess. So let me give you my answer on it. Less than 2 weeks. Now, occasionally 2 weeks goes to 3 weeks, but the problem is I find when you go past 2 weeks, you usually go to 30 days. Why? Because you're always waiting on somebody and doing something like that. Now, what's the cost of a light rehab? As I said, I'm going to go over the numbers. If you don't know the time, you can't factor in any of this stuff. If you do a wholesale and you can get ready in under 2 weeks, you have very little to any holding cost. And most of your rehab is going to come under $10,000. Now, let me give you a couple examples. What would fit nicely in this category? Maybe you got to put appliances. Maybe they took them. Maybe the appliance is really crappy. Maybe you've got to just carpet one room. Why do I like carpet more than vinyl floors or tile? Because it's fast. It's fast. A guy can lay carpet down in an hour or two and be done. Your average room on a 10 by 12 room is about $500 to $700. Done. Get the dirty, nasty stand out there, put in a neutral tan carpet. Remember, you need to get in and out of these properties as soon as possible. Now, my two favorite tools for a light rehab go in this order: pressure cleaner, paintbrush, and occasionally a dumpster. That's three. I lied to you. Pressure cleaner, paintbrush, dumpster. If you can get all that done in 2 weeks, you can usually make an amazing amount of money. The problem is most of you all lie about how much time it takes, and you assume you can do everything. And I'm here to tell you, I like when someone's painted the daughter's room like purple and the rest of the house is like tan and white. Go in, knock down the dark colors, get a painter in there and get it done. Maybe you replace the carpeting on the floor because it was stained with the outline of the bed. You change out a bad stove. You get the air handler cleaned, and you have the house pressure cleaned, the walkway cleaned, and you have the carpets steam cleaned. Maybe you're in and out $2,000. That to me is an amazing light rehab that I can get in and out. Remember, it's not always the money, it's the time that it will eat you up. On your average light deal, it should be under 10K, and honestly, 10K is pushing it to the limit. Once you go past 10K, you're not getting it done in 2 weeks. Sorry, guys. We are not rehabbers. This is not what we do, and you need to understand that. Now, the people that are going to buy your properties, they might be able to get done in a shorter amount of time, but this is where most wholesalers struggle. When you get into the light ones, these are the ones that you can actually cherry pick the wholesale, put on MLS, and do stuff like that. But here's my rules. The rehab has got to be 2 weeks or less. It's got to be well below $10,000. And you have to turn that property within 90 days. Now, I know 90 days sounds like forever, but by the time you put it on the market, negotiate a contract, go through an inspection and everything, 90 days is actually pretty tight. My rules to wholesaling: 2 weeks or less rehab, under $10,000. Hopefully half of that's appliances. And you've got to be able to cash in within 90 days. And remember, it takes 30 to 45 days just to get a contract to close. And it usually takes another 2 to 4 weeks to get a legitimate contract. And if you have one buyer thrown off there, or they don't qualify, then you're really under that tight parameters. This is the only decision you have to make as a wholesaler. Past this, you're moving it along on an assignment of contract. And if you understand that, you can easily do that. Light is 2 weeks or less. Light, 2 weeks or less. It's usually going to be under 10 grand. Now, let's move on to medium. Medium's where we get most of the houses. Honestly, I don't get a lot of light houses. Most of them are going to be medium to heavy. Why? Because we go and hunt out the most problematic houses. Why? Because that's where the most opportunity is, and that's where we're going to hunt, right? Now, when we have a medium house, we're well past 2 weeks. You can make a guesstimate of how far it goes. But a medium house is anywhere going to be from 30 to 60 days. Some will say 90. Does it really matter? It's usually going to be 45 to 60 days minimum. And remember, we're not doing the rehab, so I'm not going to get deep into the woods on this. But the average person that's going to buy it on a cash buyer is going to assume it's going to take anywhere from 30 to 90 days to get it done. And they're going to price it into your deals accordingly when they do that. Why is it important for you to understand that? Because that's what it takes, and you have to understand the time commitment. The reality is very few mediums are ever done in 30 days. Most of them are 90, in my opinion, to 180 days. But I don't want to scare my cash buyers off, so I don't spit those numbers. Don't ever take on a medium house yourself, because it's going to distract you from your wholesaling. And honestly, you're going to make more money as a wholesaler than you're ever going to make as a fix and flipper. Trust me, I've tried them both. Wholesaling dominates fix and flipping, hands down. Remember, fix and flippers, they do good when the market does good, but anytime there's a shift in interest rates or demand, they usually get hung out to dry. And because they have to forecast projects from anywhere from 6 to 12 months to a year and a half out, they can get caught with their pants down. And remember, you and me are not controlled by market conditions, but fix and flippers are. You guys just went through a massive cycle of this after 2022. Demand really fell off. Cash buyers were super picky. They're starting to come back in, and you can see that going into it. Now let's talk about the heavy duty properties, the ones that just require the most. And guys, these are the properties 100% you sell via assignment of contract. You can double close them if circumstances dictate, but I'm here to tell you, heavies are built for wholesaling on an assignment of contract. Why? You minimize your risk, you minimize the cost, and you pass the buck, the problem on to a cash buyer to buy your contract. And in return, they're looking to make a profit off of that problem. I want to create a win-win-win for the seller, for you, and your cash buyer. Now, the only way you're going to do it is find problematic properties. Now, heavy properties, time frame wise, really, really simple here, guys. The minimum is 90 days. And honestly, that's if the rehabber, the cash buyer, has an entire dedicated crew to work on the house. A lot of the people that buy these real challenged homes, the ones that need huge amounts of fix up, 50K or more, they are very professional rehabbers, and they do it for a living, and they have sometimes 10 or 12 people working for them, and they can get it done fast. It's the only way you're going to get that done. Can you imagine 1 or 2 workers working on a house that needed 100 grand worth of work? It could take years. And yes, there are people that done it. I've had somebody recently bought a house from me. He took 2 years to rehab it. Now, it was more of a personal family play, which I'm fine with, but I'm telling you, time is money. Why? Because you can do other things with your time. You can't get your time back, but you can use money to buy your time back. And you've got to understand the difference between the capital cost of a rehab and the time cost. Now, most sellers do not want to factor in the time cost. And that's where we have the biggest challenges on doing the numbers. So I like to inflate them and push them up. Now, let's jump over and do the chart. So you guys, I know you guys have seen this before, but you'll see it up on the screen here. Let me put it up nice. Okay, I put it up here. So I've actually overran these numbers for you to give you more room. So right here, we're going to have, this is going to be the light side. This is light going across here, medium, and heavy. Me and Zach have constantly changed these numbers. If I told you what these numbers are when I started, I would really date and age myself, so I won't do that. But listen, on a 1,500 square foot home, roughly 15,000, people's biggest question to me, Zach, is how do you know the difference between light and medium? First of all, walk in the house and decide if you would live in it, like normally. Don't go in there like a glitzy glamour, like a Kardashian or anything like that. But like, could you stay in that house if you had to? Number 2, smell the house. I'm sorry. Smell is everything, because you can't get smell in pictures. And when the houses smell moldy, old, smells like roaches, it stands out. That's going to add to the cost. Now, as we go up in size, you'll see the price goes up. Why? Because it's more square footage. It makes perfect sense. If you have a question, put it in the comment. I would love to hear from you guys. I want you to understand that. The other one also is then we have medium. And if you look at medium, that's right about on point. 1,500 square foot is going to start you north of 25K, 33, and then 45 when you add it up. And then when you go to heavy, this is where it depends on the quality of the house. If you have a high-end high quality house, 3,000 square feet plus, you can push north of six figures on this. Remember, guys, this is somewhat of a guesstimate, and you have to make your best educated decision without going knee deep into you. Some of you guys call general contractors, you try to do all this stuff. I'm here to tell you, you can look at a house, you can smell a house. You have to decide, is the house just cosmetic issue, or is the house severely structurally have problems? Cosmetic, guys, super easy to fix. Like, there is a number and a time for cosmetics. When you start to get into structural issues of the house, it's not always about money. Sometimes it takes an immense amount of time to fix problems. But I digress on that. So everybody look at the chart. I know this is live, but it's recorded for you. I promise you this is live. You can go back and refer to this chart. If you want to get this chart available to you, go over to freewholesaling.com. It is within the free course that me and Zach offer on wholesaling. Teach you how to get your first deal and up to your first $100,000 in wholesaling. It is all in there. Take a screenshot, whatever you do. But this chart should simplify on how you do estimates on a house. So let's take this off the screen here. So now let's talk about, we talked about cosmetics. And that's when we talk about, is the property, is it outdated? Like, what's going on with it? So before I get into, well, let's do it, because this is the biggest problem we have on it. So guys, what do you think is the biggest cosmetic fix on 90% of the houses we deal with? Put it in the comments. I want to see who gets it right. What is the number one thing that you can determine the health of a house on? I'm not talking about structurally, but like when you walk in, you can kind of right away look at this one room and you can size up the rest of the house on it. So put it in the comments. It's not structural on the roof. I'm talking about, what is the one single room you can go to in a house and go, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. Which room is it? Put it in the comments. I find this, I know this works because I've done it so long. And right here, Big M got it. It's the kitchen. I'm telling you, you walk into anybody's kitchen in a house, I can tell you exactly what you're dealing with. I can tell you their style. I can tell you if it's outdated, and I can tell you what the rest of the house is going to look like. I'm sorry, guys. Most people put the most pride into their kitchens. And, you know, what is the average kitchen? That is a great question. On average, a kitchen, these numbers have really, really exceeded. On average, a kitchen should never exceed 8 to 10% of the value of the house. So let me give you an example. If you have a $300,000 house, the kitchen's going to be between 25 and 30K. The numbers just work. I've bought houses where people over glorified the kitchen. I can't pay for all of it if you gold plated the entire kitchen. But if you undervalue and do a simple Home Depot kitchen, they're going to pay severely in the value of the property. Test me out on it, guys. 8 to 10% is the norm. Some people say 7. You can play with it depending on, 10% would be for the higher end houses and usually on the bigger square footage. So good call on that one. Guys, kitchens are big. You can smell the kitchen. Is the kitchen dark? Is it open? How is the lighting? How is the ceiling? How are the appliances? Are they rusting out? Once you see rusted out appliances, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to redo the kitchen. Now, when we redo a kitchen, what are we talking about? Guys, anywhere from 8 to 10%. So if I had a little $150,000 house, the most you're going to spend on that kitchen is 15 grand, probably closer to 12. That's it. I hope this simplifies it for you. But when you guys look at a kitchen, remember, you're not doing the rehab, but your cash buyers are doing it. So when they look at the kitchen, if you see rusted appliances, really dark, dingy, it looks like it's from the 70s, you just have to start over. Probably going to have to open up some walls, do some modern cabinetry, definitely stainless steel appliances, and that's it. So you're better off just pricing and replacing the entire kitchen and redoing it. 8 to 10% will cover you every time. Do you guys understand that? And honestly, if I have a good kitchen, usually the rest of the house is going to flow very well around it. Coming up, number 2. So 8 to 10% on kitchens is a easy rule. Yes, you can replay this, record it, like whatever you want to do. Next one, bathrooms. Now, this is an interesting one because I've done some calculations over the time. God knows I've rehabbed enough bathrooms. And so there's basically 3 types of bathrooms. Bathroom number 1 is going to be a master bathroom. This is the one connected to the main bedroom, and it's usually connected in there. I don't know what they call it, in suite or whatever I guess you call it. Not all those fancy with the words. This bathroom's going to be the most expensive one. Now, what's the cost on this bathroom? It doesn't work out as much percentage-wise on it. So if I had a $300,000 house, I'm probably going to go with 5 to 7% on a master bathroom. Does everybody get that? 5 to 7%. So if I had a $200,000 house on a master bathroom, on average, you're going to spend about 10 grand. Rick, why is it so much? You have to put in a vanity, sometimes a dual. You got to do sinks. You're going to have to build a shower. You might have to put in a tub. All this stuff easily adds up to 10 grand. Minimum. Now, that's the master bathroom. That is the most grandest, between 5%, 7% if you're doing a higher end home. I've seen them as high as 9 and 10%. But remember, there's a value where the bathroom exceeds what the worth of the house is. And if they ever exceed that, if you guys have ever bought a house and someone made the bathroom so nice, but it was just like this beat up property in a really rough neighborhood, no one's going to pay extra for that bathroom. So it's all got to fit. Bathroom number 2, that is going to be the guest bathroom. This one's much easier. The guest bathroom is usually around 3% of the value of the home. $300,000 home, 3% under 9 grand. Now, if you're in a less than a 1,500 square foot, definitely 1,200, you definitely push that number down to 2 to 2.5%. End of story. Basically, if you want to do easy math on it, just make it half the cost of the master bathroom. Very, very simple, right? Third type of bathroom is just what we call like a half bath. And then basically that's going to be 1 to 1.5% of the value of the home. These are just ones with like a downstairs toilet, and they go with that. They're very, very simple to rehab. My favorite to rehab because they don't cost a lot of money. And most importantly, it doesn't cost a lot of time. Remember, time is going to be your biggest enemy when factoring in rehab. The faster a cash buyer can convert the house, the more money they'll offer you on it. Now, the more rehab it needs, they're going to have to figure out what the rehab costs are and figure out what their holding time costs are. And remember, the longer that gap between when they purchase and they sell, the more they're at risk. The same thing that you're trying to minimize, the cash buyer is trying to minimize as well too. And so the bigger the project is, you really got to get a low number because every cash buyer has a different threshold on what they plan on, what their holding time is. Some think they can get it done overnight, but like most don't understand it. Time, guys, is probably the biggest factor that nobody ever talks about when it comes to rehab. You have to understand that. Now, let's keep moving on here. We talked about kitchen and bath. Kitchen and bath is basically like the heart of a home. It tells you the cleanliness of someone. It tells you if they're modern update and if the numbers have kept in line with the rest of the house. Now, past the kitchen and bath, it gets much easier because you just have rooms. And so your next biggest expense on that is going to be flooring. So if we know flooring is going to be, and we jump up and we look at the square footage on it, it is just a multiple. Now, I've done a lot of flooring in my life. I've already told you the one reason why I do like carpet. I don't like personally to have carpet in my house, but if I have to do a wholesale, I will do carpet every time. It's fast and it's cheap. It can be rolled out, tacked down, and be done. The problem with tile, it has to be slowly laid down, carefully cut, takes time to dry, and then you have to grout. Tile on average is going to take you 2.5 times as long as carpet. Tile has to be ordered. It's heavy. It has to be conditioned in the room. You don't have to put up with any of this crap on carpet. So I know a lot of you guys say, oh, carpet, I hate it. I'm telling you, carpet is your friend as a wholesaler, and it gets you through it. I've had rehabbers. I've had people and most people go like this. Oh, if it's carpet, I'll just pull it up and I'll put down what I want. You can't do that when you do tile. You're stuck. You're like, what about laminate? Yes, you can pull up laminate, but there's a tremendous amount of time and effort goes into cutting and snapping each piece in place. And I'm here to tell you guys, I just kind of like to do carpet. It's fast. I put down a builder grade carpet and I call it a day. How much? 500 to 700 per room. Now, if you're going to do tile, that's typically going to be your highest. It's going to be between $7 and $9 a square foot with labor. There's a lot of factors that go into it. It takes the longest amount of time. If you're talking about vinyl flooring, it seems easy, but once again, it is heavy. You have to condition the product for at least 3 or 4 days before it's put down, and you have to have somebody cutting. And the reason I like it, it makes a huge mess. In the front yard, in the backyard, or worst case scenario, if they cut it inside the house, it's the absolute worst. It just does take time, and you still have to deal with baseboards and all that other stuff. And on average, the laminate floor does not save you a ton of money. You can go with a cheaper product, and you can get it done between $5 and $8 a square foot. The average install is about $4 a square foot. You're going to get nickel and dime on baseboards, pulling up old tack boards, stuff like that. For this reason, if I can go with carpet, I do it for speed. Time is my most valuable resource when I'm doing a wholesale or I'm trying to sell it to a cash buyer. So flooring is just going to be a calculation of what the square footage is. So if I have 1,500 square feet and it's $7 a square foot, you just do the price. That's why you can understand. A couple tips on flooring, guys. You guys aren't doing the rehab. But I will tell you this. The one thing I've understand is one thorough, beautiful flowing floor through an entire house sells so much faster than a house that's got like 7 different types of floors. Time tested. It's always proven. A lot of times we buy houses, they have a ton of different floors. Sometimes you have to neutralize these floors. Now, the one thing I left out on vinyl, one of the nice things about vinyl, if you got some old dated tile, instead of digging up and ripping up the tile, which is extremely time consuming, extremely expensive, and not only mention really messy, you can use the laminate floor to go right over it. And that is the one time where laminate rules, and it is the best fit in it. Chipping up that tile is going to cost you weeks, and it makes a huge, huge mess. So that's how you do flooring. You've got to understand flooring has a hard cost. In my opinion, it's going to be anywhere from $4 to $9 a square foot. Figure out the size of the house you have under air, and you can do that number. Now, I like to carpet bedrooms because they're simple and they're fast. And a main living area, in the perfect world, I would put down like a laminate or something that flows all the way through the house. But remember, I'm not a rehabber. I don't run a Flip This TV show. All that stuff is the designer part. Did you guys know most fix and flip houses, they are not catered to wholesalers like us or basically real estate investors. They are designed on 2 items. Number 1, design and fashion. People love to see updated houses. They never consider how much money and time it costs because it's never factored into it. And number 2, it's all about drama. How dramatic can we make the story? You guys know exactly what I'm talking about with that. And that's why I don't really tune into those shows. But apparently America is flabbergasted with it. So they have entire contest on it. And most of the shows wind up being BS. Now, let's talk about the next thing, which this is the one I do like and is very manageable. Painting. Inside, outside, very simple. If you have a 1-story single family house, the outside's a piece of cake to paint. Now, most people wind up spraying it for cost. They got to tape it off, and they don't do it on a windy day. But it depends on the square footage once again. Now, to paint the outside of the house of a 1-story, a house that's 1,500 square feet, you can normally get it done between $2,500 and $3,500. Why? It's pretty straightforward. It just depends on the color and how much taping they have to do on the windows. Make sure you get someone who knows what they're doing, because if you get a handyman that oversprays the windows, the siding on the house, stuff like that, it's going to look like crap, and you're going to spend a fortune trying to clean it up. Now, the inside is where most people have the challenges. Why? It's not about the money. Once again, it is about the time. It takes time to paint the inside of the house. And unless you have a house completely stripped down, most of the painting is going to be rolled on. Rolling takes time. A 1,500 square foot house on average with a minimum of 2, if not 4 painters is going to take 1 week. And I'm talking about a 7 solid days. Now, it makes a tremendous difference. And when you paint on white or light tan colors like that, it really opens up the house and makes it much brighter. Guys, I get rid of so here's one of the tricks I do. When I'm even showing to my cash buyers, I get rid of every dated, um, what do they call it? Window dressings, coverings, and I throw them all in the garbage. Just get them off. Bring as much light as you can in the house. Paint them white. The inside of the paint of the house is going to be between $3,000 and $5,000. I know it's a little bit high, but it's getting really expensive. The paint's going up, everything's going up, and that's the part that'll kill you. Now, I always try to get a package deal of $4 to $5 grand, paint the inside and the outside of the house. But guys, keep this in mind. Anyone can say yes to the job. What I typically do is supply the paint. I use a vendor account at my local Benjamin store, Sherwin-Williams. It's very easy to get. And then you can get it down to the labor and figure it out. But I always put a timestamp on it. So if they tell me it's going to be 7 days to paint the interior of their house, that's fine. 7 days, here's the price. Every day after that is $150, $200 penalty. Meaning if you try to do a bunch of other jobs and all this stuff, I'm just going to pay you less. You have to do it. Painters are notorious for overbidding and taking on too much work and just dealing with whoever yells at them the most. So the best way, instead of you yelling at them, you're better off to create a financial incentive to get the job done. A lot of them, I'll offer them a $300 bonus if they get it done by the 7th day at 5 p.m. Offer an incentive. They'll work harder for you. They'll do it. The problem with painters, a lot of painters like to show up at noon and they like to leave when the sun goes down, and they waste a lot of time. When you got to paint the inside of the house, there's a lot of detail. And here's the one thing you guys got to consider. Are you painting the ceiling or not? You do ceilings, you got to usually add at least $1,000 to $1,500 to it. Ceiling's got to be done first, by the way. So that's it, guys. So after we do that, after we do the bathrooms, the kitchens, flooring and painting are your kind of biggest expenses type of deal. Now, remember, the chart that I show you, that me and Zach put it back on the screen, it is kind of encompassed of most of the stuff. It depends on the condition of the house. Some of it has to be a la carte. These are just general numbers to give you an average. Why? Because what are you going to do? Go out and get a general contractor to give you all these estimates? It would cost you a ton of time and money, and nobody wants to work for free. This is why we share these charts with you, so you can go out and accurately guesstimate a number for rehab. And by using this chart and using the go for no strategy we teach you, you have all the tools you need to write a contract. But I wouldn't be responsible if I didn't go into some of the stuff a lot of you guys overlook. So I want you to understand this. We just did cosmetic. And what's cosmetic going to be? The kitchens, the baths, the flooring, and the painting. Now, let me take this off the screen. What we have to figure in is what we call house core items. And then this is the structural part of the house that nobody ever wants to talk about. And let's face it, a lot of the properties, we have to deal with these issues. So if we know this going into it, you've got to identify them. Now, the more the house smells and the uglier it gets, the more you have to look into these units. So I tell you guys, every time you walk in and look at a house, always look up. Look for stains in the ceiling. Most ceilings are painted white or light color. It's so easy to see a brown patch. That means you have a leaky roof, or you've got a leaky AC or a pipe. And remember, if you see the stain, that means the seller didn't address it, and they're typically going to pass a problem off to you. Most of them go, it's no big deal. It stopped years ago. That's not the truth. Otherwise, they probably would have painted it and called it a day. So let's talk about the biggest house core items. The biggest one you'll have to deal with, a lot of you say is the roof, but it's not. The biggest one you got to understand is a foundation of the house. Foundation is what the house is built on. So most houses, well, not most, but there's two ways to basically build a house. One is they put it on a concrete slab foundation, the preferred way. Why? Because it's the most solid and creates the most stability. But in a lot of areas in the country, even here in Florida, they build houses on basically like a crawl space where they put in pilings and all the piping and underneath. That's why they call it a crawl space, because you can crawl under it and get underneath the house. Now, I'm not a big fan of crawl spaces, because 9 times out of 10, they just invite a lot of creatures to get under there and mess with the house. raccoons, possums, you name it, all sorts of nasty stuff. If you've ever been in a crawl space to do inspection, it sucks. Now, the only positive thing about a crawl space, if you have a major plumbing issue, anything can be fixed because you get under it. Understanding that the plumbing, when it comes to houses built on a concrete foundation, they are poured within the concrete. So if you get a cracked pipe, it can be hugely problematic down the road. And I've had that happen on older homes. Some of the older homes in South Florida were put on poured concrete, and they put in very, very narrow iron pipes for the plumbing. And those pipes are all failing now. And sometimes you have to excavate through the kitchen and dig up down 4 feet into the ground floor to fix what's normally $1,000 pipe problem, which turns out being a $20,000, $30,000 problem. So foundations, you got to be aware of them. Rick, how do I know if I have a bad foundation? I'm going to let you in a little secret. If you ever see a door that sticks or doesn't close correctly, or it's very weird, that sometimes means you have a crooked foundation. And once the foundation starts sagging, the biggest telltale are going to be the roof. So if you have a roof that joins right here, you'll see some settling. Settling is normal on a roof, but I'm here to tell you, if the crack can fit a quarter in it, that's not normal. That means you have massive movement in the house. The other part is when it comes to the doors and the door jambs. If a door gets stuck or it won't shut, a lot of times it means you have a foundation issue. Now, here's a little secret. If you have a foundation issue, if you ever have a racquetball or a golf ball, put it in the center room and see if that ball moves. If that ball moves, it means you don't have a level floor, and that could be huge signs of a big bad problem coming down the pipeline. And if you know that going into it, you can address it. Now, most of the times I've had modern houses with sinking foundations, and it was very apparent with the cracks. I looked at cracks on the outside of the stucco. I looked at the doors and I looked at the ceiling. If everything starts seeing crack and they're bigger and you can fit a quarter in there, it means you have a massive problem. Just run, because it is undetermined what they cost to fix. And they've probably been through at least a dozen contracts. You're just going to be another one to get through it. You don't want to get stuck with those types of houses. Whenever we have a massive foundation issue, I pass, because it could cost you 6 figures just to fix that part alone. It would have to be a ridiculously cheap house. And typically when you have a foundation issue, it just keeps coming back. It means the ground's unstable. Sometimes there's vegetation underneath the dirt. And what are you going to do? Pick up the house and lift it off of there? That's usually not a great option. So foundations are the one where if it's completely screwed up, I just move on with my life. How do I know this? Doors don't shut. I see cracks in the ceiling. I see cracks down the wall, and I walk the exterior and I look carefully and I see additional cracking. Now, don't mix this up with there is common spider cracking in drywall and on stucco. I'm talking about when the gaps start to get big and you see them running for like the entire length of the building. That is not right. It almost looks like it got rocked by an earthquake. Those you want to run from. The next biggest thing you got to understand is roof. Roofs suck. They're a pain in the butt. Now, insurance companies are on the attack on roofs. And right now, the insurance industry is trying to mandate that a single-family homeowner gets their roof replaced every 10 years, or they don't want to insure them. Now, that's hogwash. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Roofs in South Florida, in extreme environments where you have a lot of wind, hurricanes, we get a lot of rain, we get a lot of salt exposure. The average roof life is 15 to 20 years. Occasionally, you get a 25-year roof. I'm talking about a fiberglass shingle roof. The average cost of a roof in South Florida, and once again, I'm going to bring up, depending on the size of it, on a 1,500 square foot house, the average roof is going to be between $10,000 and $12,000, maybe even $15,000. When I go to 1,500 or more, it's going to fall around 15 to 18 grand. And when it's 3K or more, it's going to be north of $20,000. How do you know if you have a bad roof? This is the easiest one of them all, guys. A bad roof is easy. Why? All you have to do is go on your property appraiser site or your tax collector site, whoever collects the information, and find out when the last time that roof was permitted. Do not buy the seller's story of when that roof was permitted. I want you to understand this. If there hasn't been a permit pulled in 20 years, it means it's probably the original roof and it's due to be replaced. When your cash buyers go to buy your contract, they're going to know it's an old roof based on the permit, and they're going to factor it into the price. So when a homeowner goes, well, the roof's on, but like there's no issues. If that house is in immaculate shape and great shape, which odds are they're not, then you might get by with that roof. But the problem is when the cash buyer modernizes the house to bring it up, that roof is going to be outdated and the insurance companies are going to expect a new roof. And guys, when you have an old roof, in my opinion, once the roof's 15 years or older, it typically needs some sort of replacement. And even if you're not going to replace it, you're going to have to build it in the cost of buying the house. Because if a rehabber builds the whole thing up and you leave that old dilapidated roof on there, then it's a liability for the insurance company. They typically don't want to insure it. So a roof, if it's more than 20 years old, you're probably going to have problems. Don't be shocked and stop taking the seller's word for it. A lot of sellers do roofs without permits, which is completely illegal. Also, sometimes sellers just put a new roof on top of the old one. Why? Because it saves time and money and they don't have to get a permit for it. And you create structural issues because you just doubled the weight on the roof. It was never designed for that on the trusses. And they did that as a quick Band-Aid. And whoever goes to tear off that roof is going to spend a lot of time and aggravation pulling it off. So roofs are a big one. They're huge here in Florida. I know you guys deal with them all over the country. You should have an idea what the average roof costs now. Now, when I started out doing this, the difference between a shingle roof and a metal roof was like a night and day. Metal was significantly more expensive. Right now, they're the actual same cost all around the country. Just the cost of materials. I don't think there's a supply chain issue, but I'm here to tell you, metal roofs aesthetically look better but if I have an entire neighborhood that has all shingle roofs, I'm going to keep it shingle roofs. You don't want to stand out like a sore thumb. So, and if you have an HOA, you got to make sure that you figure it in there. So that's enough on roofs. On average, a roof's going to be between 10 and 30K, depending on the size and the type of property. Now, a lot of you guys overlook electrical. Rick, what are you talking about electrical? Let me give you an example. In Port St. Lucie, I bought so many houses. They put in a certain type of electrical panel. I believe GE made it, and it was wind up being a liability. And right now, if you're found with this certain type of panel, you actually have to have it removed by a licensed electrician. You have to have the whole new updated type of circuit box put in there. And it's not cheap. It's $2,000 or $3,000 to do it. And if you don't do it, you can't get insurance on the property. Why? Because these things they became faulty. They would overload. I actually had one house almost burned down completely of it. I've bought at least 40 houses with these types in there. I just replaced them. I know the cost going into it. Why? These panels were built in the 70s and they're just not up to code and they can't handle the additional amperage. So most of them were built for like 50 amps. Today's modern houses are 70 to 75 amps and higher. I'm not getting into like the weeds on electrical, but the reason why I bring up electrical, if you guys are in the Northeast or you're in the part of the country where you're buying really old houses, and you're like, Rick, what's a really old house? If you have those bulb styles for, instead of having a circuit breaker, it's a bulb. So back in the 30s to the 60s even, they had a bulb. And what happens, it's just like a transistor. And when it pops, it breaks. And that acts as the circuit breaker. The problem is and if you go, hey, Rick, how do I know if you have one? The panel's going to be about this big and it's going to have 6 to 9 bulbs in it. And they're usually very big wires in the back of it. You got to update these panels, guys. You cannot work with those panels. And if you don't know the cost in it, you've got to figure it out with a licensed electrician. To rewire a house on average on a simple small house can be 10 to 12 grand. Sorry, that's just the cost on it. Those houses were much simpler back then, and you got to figure out the pricing. Now, I don't want to just kind of leave you there. We talk about plumbing. And here's the only time I have plumbing: when people do add-ons that they never got permitted, like a bathroom, absolute nightmare. And number two is when you have old houses built in the 20s and 30s, they had these narrow, like iron cast pipes, and they were poured in concrete. Well, a lot of these pipes are failing, and it's a real problem with it. So you've got to consider the electrical and plumbing. I only really look at that when I have really, really old houses. So, I can tell you horror stories on it. Guys, listen, you want to stick to wholesaling because that's the best way to make money. So here's what I'm going to do. If you guys want to jump on a live one-on-one, just go over to Wholesaling Houses for Real. Click the link on there. I'm not going to walk you through it. It's right there. And we can do a one-on-one. Or I tell you what, for convenience, I'll just go ahead and post it up here. First come, first serve basis. Guys, it is important you understand how this works when you try to figure out rehab costs. I don't want you to be an expert on it. You're never going to get it nailed right. But I've taught you the tricks between light, medium, and heavy. And you got to understand the difference between capital cost and time cost. I understand time is more of a factor than capital because it's undetermined. Capital is pretty much planned for and people plan for it. Most people under budget when they do rehab projects and they underestimate the amount of time in it. So you've got to figure it out when you do it. So I put if you guys want to hop on the one-on-ones, I'm going to answer some questions here. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So we can talk about anything with like wholesaling, anything you guys want to do. I will tell you guys, the smell of a house will tell you almost anything that you want to know. I don't know why, but like a lot of times you guys look at pictures, there's no smells, there's nothing. And for that reason, I got to tell you, once I walk in a house and smell it, I can tell you exactly 9 times out of 10 what I'm dealing with. Only just because I've done it so many times. Smell alone. I'm telling you, I've had houses that actually look really good when they smell. I've watched cash buyers go, I don't even want to deal with it. I once bought a house in Vero Beach and the lady had, she had cats and ferrets. Now the cats weren't the problem. Here was the problem is the ferrets peed through the carpet. She pulled up the carpet and she left ferrets in one of the bedrooms for 2 years. I think it was 3 or 4 ferrets. If you guys ever dealt with ferrets, they're very interesting animals. Very, very interesting animals. I don't understand them, but they have pee that has a smell that it will blow you away on like if you thought a cat was bad, this one absolutely takes the cake. And what happens is that pee, if you guys have untreated concrete, which most of you have under the floor, it's very absorptive. And concrete is porous. It's a rock and it sucks everything in. Well, if you 2 years let a cat or a ferret pee on concrete forever, you would have to almost shave all the concrete down probably 4 inches to get rid of that smell. We tried everything. We tried sealing it. We tried doing everything. And I'm here to tell you guys, for that reason alone, sometimes smell alone will take you out on a property. That property I struggled with. I actually had to give it away to a cash buyer because I couldn't get rid of it. The smell was so bad. We tried everything. Now, if you want to cover up smell real quick, I'm going to give you a quick little hack here. If you just want to temporarily cover it up and make it pleasant enough and paint the pictures for your cash buyers, just go get a thing of Folgers grinded coffee grinds, and you can pour them around the edge of the cracks of the property. These are for ugly properties, but coffee disguises a lot of smells, and nobody ever complains about the smell of grind up coffee beans. It's easy to clean up, and I'm here to tell you, if it's good enough for people smuggling stuff in the country, it's good enough for your properties. I don't like smelly houses. I've dealt with a lot of them. The problem is sometimes I've had what I thought the perfect house is. The smell was so bad, I could barely give it away. It didn't need a lot of rehab. It just smelled so bad and nobody could figure out where the smell's coming out. When smells sit on an open exposed concrete, after a while, the house absorbs it like a big sponge and it becomes hugely, hugely problematic. And I want you to understand that when you're doing it. So let me answer some questions. If you guys want to hop on the one-on-one, I put the links up there. You want to do it. Eric says, how do you do an ARV for a church? Easy. Square footage, figure out what you need to do. I have bought churches before. It's very, very different from regular properties. But remember, if your job is just to get in and out, find out what the church needs. Sometimes you might have to meet with a GC to find out what that church needs. A lot of churches that get sold quickly have structural problems, and those ones you got to be careful about. But it's a little bit more of a commercial aspect. I will tell you, churches are kind of a mess because most of the churches I dealt with are churches being foreclosed on because they got in a financial bind because they took a private loan out and they ran out of money. So just keep that in mind. Let's see here. Eric says, what point would you create an LLC for wholesaling? I'd probably get a deal or two first. You're not going to make any money creating the LLC. So remember, you can actually, as long as you have an assignable contract, you can create an LLC right up to the day of your closing and assign it over to it. It's 100% legal. You can actually have a check made out to your LLC company and not even have it. Well, not every title company will make a check out to a company not formed. But guys, on average, it's between $100 and $150 to form your own corporation. It's really simple. And you need to understand, just saying you're getting into an LLC, it doesn't mean a lot. It just separates you from your business, but you have the same tax liability personally on that. So you want to make sure you meet with a good qualified CPA to figure out how to do that. But don't get hung up on LLCs ain't going to make you guys any money. So, okay. And so Joey, here's a problem with that. If I just assign a dollar amount and do it per square foot, there's a lot of factors that go into it. So that's why I want you to always refer to this chart. It just makes it simple and easy. The problem with most of you is you guys spend so much time trying to calculate perfect comps and rehab numbers, when the reality is you should be figuring out how to talk to sellers and how to build rapport with them to get the absolute best deals humanly possible, because that's what you need to do to make everything work. End of story. So go over to freewholesaling.com. I'd rather you spend more time there. I'd rather you spend more time at Flip with Rick Plus. Remember, doing comping and doing rehab, you have to know how to do it. But like once you do it, you kind of put it on autopilot and you adjust your numbers as inflation, as our lovely administration keeps jacking the price of everything by putting so much money into our economy. So that being said, you can do it either way, So, okay. Let's see what other questions I have here. I just love your sense of humor and real truth. Have you have a talk with my wife. She doesn't always like it. It's okay. It's just who I am. A big part of that is like my ADHD. I find like I consume a lot of information. I read a lot of books, a lot of podcasts, but honestly, I've had people have like the absolute best information in the world and they just put you to sleep. It's like crazy. So you got to have fun with what you do. There's no difference in wholesaling because it gets really boring. Sometimes I just want to wrestle Zach and battle royal out with him when we have it out. But like that's families and that's how kids work. So, okay. Okay, let's jump on. I'm going to jump on and do some lives. If anybody else wants to connect, let me take this off the screen. James, you there?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you? What's going on?
Pretty good. Hey, I have a question about a response from a tarot company that I had. I asked them about if they do an assignment of contracts, and they say yes. And I asked them about double closing, and they were kind of like worried about that. Like they don't know what that meant.
It's not a good sign.
Yeah. So I showed them the two contracts which you guys provide, the purchase and sell and the assignment.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh yes, we work with those contracts every day."
Every day.
Every day, not every day, but like.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
There you are. So what's the question?
If that's a good flag, green flag or a red flag, I don't know.
I wouldn't write them off. Like a lot of people, most people don't understand what a double closing is.
Yeah.
In the reality, you won't do a double closing unless you have to. And a lot of times your sellers will dictate it. Occasionally a buyer will, but I never let buyers dictate how I buy and sell a property ever.
Mm-hmm.
So occasionally there's just weird things happen that you have to do a double close. So I would concentrate on the assignment of contract. And here's where your guys are most at risk when you deal with a title company. Title companies create their own policies and procedures, and they're usually dictated by the owner.
Hmm.
Now, some owners don't care. Some have an opinion about wholesalers, and they'll let everybody know. And the problem is if they have a negative connotation about a wholesaler, meaning they think you're putting them at risk, they're going to go out of their way to disclose stuff, and it will be problematic for you. You got to find out sooner or later if they do that. What do I mean by that? When you do a HUD, there's going to be a line item for your assignment fee. Some title companies will circle it, highlight it, and tell everybody involved in the transaction that James is making a $20,000 assignment, and I want to make sure you're okay with it. It's going to be hugely problematic for you
Hmm.
because they're trying to create a problem where it doesn't even exist. Do you understand that?
Can you say it again? You cut out.
Title companies will create a problem where it never existed in the beginning.
Hmm.
Now, my title company doesn't, if you've ever seen a HUD, which it's usually 2 to 3 pages, it's very long, has a million line items, unless somebody pointed you out the assignment fee, you would never know it's there. It's just there's so many other fees on there. Like it's not a big deal.
Uh-huh.
The problem is when a title company goes out of their way and tries to sabotage the transaction just to cover their butt. I can't stand that, and I don't want to deal with it. So that's the only thing you got to make sure they're not going to do.
All right.
So I'm okay with them putting it on the HUD. I'm not looking to hide anything, but I don't need them to go out of the way to go, look how much money James is making. Look how much Rick's making. Do you think that's fair? That's what they're doing to you when they do that. Why don't they do the same thing with their fees? Look at the fees we're charging. Are you okay with it? Do you think they're in line? They would never do that with their own fees. So why do you let them do it with your fees? So unless you're going to do that with every line item on the HUD, I'm not doing business with you. And by the way, when you don't vet your title companies and you get caught in that position, they will go out of their way to sabotage your deal because they don't like wholesalers and they don't think it's fair you make that amount of money. They're like, we're only charging 1,500. He's making 20,000. I'm like, I brought you the deal. I don't even want to hear about it. So
Yeah.
that's what you're really trying to avoid with the title companies. When it comes to double closings, I wouldn't get obsessed with it right off the bat because most people don't understand what a double closing is. A double closing is 2 separate closings. They're just completely financially independent of each other. And title companies actually like them because you double their fees, right?
Yeah.
They make a crap load of money. But a lot of title companies assume you're doing something illegal with a double closing. There's something called a simultaneous closing. There's what you can do a dry closing, and they all get wrapped up in that word double closing. They all don't mean the same. They all have like little trickeries.
Yeah.
An authentic double closing is I buy a property from you, James, and then I turn around 5 minutes later and I sell it to another person, and they're completely separate. The only thing that separates them is time. The problem is a lot of people tie in things. Well, when I get his money, I'll use it for this deal and I'll do that and I'll hide this. That's where title companies do have to be careful and they don't want to break any laws. But on a simple assignment, the contract, you're okay putting a line on them. I just don't want them highlighting it and go, hey, did you know James is making $25,000 today? Are you okay with that? Are you really okay with it? I've watched them do it just like that. And that, if you can prevent that, you'll be fine. If you can't prevent that, and that's what they want to do, you have to do a double closing, which means you got to go out and get money. You're going to double your transaction fees, and you're going to wind up with like 14 grand. So you're going to give up 5 or 6 grand just to facilitate to make the title company happy. So that's the one thing that you absolutely have to prevent from your title company. Does that make sense?
Can you repeat it a little bit?
You just want them not to go out of their way to disclose the assignment fee. Now, keep in mind, I teach you to tell everyone. They go, what are you going to do with the profit? They say, what are you going to do with the property when you buy it? It just depends on how much I buy it from you, how much rehab it needs. I might rent it. I might sell it to one of my cash partners. I might keep it for a rental property. I have no idea. But the bottom line is if I buy your property for $100,000, you're getting your $100,000. And that's what most sellers are fine with. And then you get to the title company and you get there and say you're collecting a $20,000 assignment fee. That's fine. They're still getting their $100,000. It doesn't affect the seller. Once you start telling the seller you're getting 20 grand, they assume 20 grand is coming out of their pocket and it becomes a real problem. And you just don't want a title company's policies and procedures to run you under the bus. Keep in mind, you brought them the business. So I just want to know if you're going to, how you're going to do it up front. And you know what? Just ask them. Do you guys just put the assignment fee on the HUD, and do you over disclose it? Ask them what I mean. Some title companies make them sign separate documents, just making you fully aware the property is being assigned. There is no legal law that says you have to do that. So I'm just trying to prevent them from running you under the bus.
Okay.
So just ask away. Go, listen, when I do it, I know there's going to be a line item for an assignment fee, but basically I have to sign the HUD. The seller signs the HUD and the deed, and that's pretty much it, right? Yes. Some title companies go so far out of their way to like seem like what we do is like illegal. And if you find those type of people, now those type of title companies do 98% deals with realtors, and that's who they cater to. You just got to find one that's okay with working with a title company that likes to work with investors like us. If they have a negative connotation with the word wholesaler, I don't want to do business with them.
Yeah, because
there are some title companies that put, there are some wholesalers that put title companies in precarious positions, but you're not going to do that. You just want to find out, like, are you going to make this extra difficult on me? And honestly, the sooner you ask, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, because there was like 3 title companies in my markets. 2 of them are like corporate owned, like they're big title companies, like nationwide. And there was one title company that was like less. It's like how you explain. It's like a mom and pop shop title company.
Yeah.
So I called them, and they were the one that actually told me like, "Oh yes, we can work with these contracts."
So what you want to do is, number one, stay away from big national title companies. They're a nightmare. They all have a lot of policies and procedures. Looks for small and mom pop ones that's owned by a single individual or like a husband-wife team. Those are typically going to be your best ones. Do not go with the national ones. They're a nightmare. They have set policies and they're going to run you into the bus every time. Sorry. It's just the truth. Okay. And then find one that ask, how many other investors they work with. They go, we work with a couple. You should have one that works with at least 10 or 12 investors on average, because they've kind of seen everything and they're not scared of it. When someone's only works with 1 or 2 investors, they're nervous with like what they're going to do, and they don't like to work with them. So remember, I'm not here to make anybody work with me that doesn't want to work with me, but you've got to be flexible enough to understand the way I operate. I bring you the business as long as you underwrite the title and you verify the seller's selling and the buyer's buying. That is their job. Their job's not to pass judgment on what a wholesaler does, if it's right or wrong. I'm not asking for your opinion on that. And the minute they infiltrate that, run. You got to find out before, though, because once you have it under contract and you tell the seller, hey, here's my XYZ title company, they call them, they do everything. It looks very suspicious if you have to switch title companies midstream. You're going to lose credibility. That's why I want you to vet it out before. In fact, I have an entire video, if you go to the Flip with Rick channel, on how to vet your title companies. It's one of the most popular videos I did. Just look it up. It'll help you out a lot. It's like 25 minutes.
All right.
Okay?
All right. Thank you, Rick.
Okay, man. I'll see you. Is it Keen or Kenye? You there? Hello? Hello? Kenya, you there? I don't think Kenya wants to talk to me. His phone. Your phone's ringing. Okay. Well, I'll go back. I will go back to that one. So, let's see here. So Michael asks on this one, is the ARV significantly different on a modular home on a permanent brick foundation with 1.5 acres from a traditional? Yes, at least 10, if not 12%. But it's becoming less and less of a difference in today's modern society because of the cost of housing. A modular home is always going to be cheaper than a custom-made home that's built per specs. But so the rule of thumb in the old days was a 15% discount. It's closer to 10 now, and that's it. But sometimes you can tell a modular home, and sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can tell the way they put them together. You can see the bolts like coming through the size on it. So, Jay, you there? Jay.
Hey, Rick, can you hear me?
Yeah, man. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. What's up? What can I help you out with?
Um, yeah. So currently, I'm looking at this Zillow listing. It's
Mhm.
been on here for like I'm not looking at it right now, but trying to go off my head. It's been listed for like 150 days. It's a multi-family, 5 bed, 2 bath. Um,
Mhm.
it's currently rented for 2,400 a month, so 1,200 each unit. And the seller has it listed for 165,000. But so my question is, they first originally had it listed some months ago, I think in November, for 275, and
Uh-huh.
just every month they're cutting it, a couple grand. And he said he's been having some offers, some cash offers for 130, 140. And I'm trying to find some comparables in it, and all the comps are all over the place. There's not really any good ones. And I know you and Zach say to use how much it rents out a month, to use that and multiply it by 100. So
How much
by
does it rent out for?
so like I said, it's 2 units.
Uh-huh.
Each unit's 1,200 a month, so in total would be 2,400.
Okay. And what's he asking for? What's his ask price now?
165.
Okay. Does
He,
the property need repairs?
so the pictures that he has it on there, it looks like it may need do. I think I seen like some small holes on the walls,
Mhm.
some patching on the walls, maybe some paint.
Yeah.
Um, I know he said that the upstairs unit is laminate flooring,
Uh-huh.
and in the pictures I can tell that there's like a crack. It looks like tile. It looks like there's a crack, but I'm not sure if that's the laminate that makes it look like that.
Yeah. So
Um,
have you've already spoke to the seller, right?
yeah, he said his lowest is actually 155 that he take.
Yeah. And he started at what? Two what?
275 like up in
Yeah.
November.
So why do you think a seller would list a property for 275 when he's down to like 155, 160 now? Why do you think they would start out like that high?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about
You
that.
know the
So I was
answer.
wondering.
It's because they're delusional. So here's the problem you have with like all Zillow listings on this. They start at 275 and say you wind
Mhm,
up, say you got down to 150. So
mhm,
basically it is like a sharp knife tumbling down, right? And the
mhm,
more that thing tumbles, the mine was like, what's everybody waiting for it? They want to see if it hits the floor and bounces back up. Nobody wants to grab a knife when it's falling for obvious reasons, right? And this is
mhm,
the problem you have with this property. Number one, you have a delusional seller. A lot of you go, well, you went from 275 to like 150 ish. The problem is that 120 some odd $1,000 of delusion was never a real price. The reality, he probably should have started at like 155, 150, and he probably would have wound up at 130. So
mhm,
don't get stuck in the he was here and now I got him here. All, all everything from this up is BS. It's delusion. And you can't factor that in when you make an offer on these types of properties.
mhm.
Now, here's what's happened is how long has it been on the market for?
So it's been listed for like around 150 days.
Yeah. So at about 180 days, nobody cares anymore, right? It's like
Mhm,
it's a joke. And this is where you have to remember I always tell you when you have delusional sellers, what's the two things that you have to wait for to make a deal happen? What are the two things that are required for a delusional seller? It's not a beating, which should be, but what are the two things? Anybody can do in the
So
comments. Help Jay out here.
you're cutting out right there. I can't really hear what you're saying.
There's two things required for a delusional seller to take a deal. And there's only two things that can fix them. Does anybody know
Uh,
what the two things are? It's simple. Number one, circumstances have to change in their life. Something has to change where it creates a priority. Number
mhm,
two, time. Time has to go by. I would even say a third one is they've probably been punished by the market so bad that they just Luca hit it right here. Time is the biggest thing, and then circumstances. And Chris also says their motivation changes because after enough people tell you you're absolutely crazy with your price, it's never going to be worth that. The longer that house is on the market, the more the market is right. So the market at this point, I don't think the house is worth more than $150, $160, because that's what the market. No matter what he put it above that, that's just delusional, and you can't factor that into your decision. So now you have a starting point, but he's been chasing the price the entire time. When these people cut their prices like $3,000 to $5,000 every month, I just find it's comical. Like, what are you going to like suck me in? Like, it's crazy. And I want you to understand that you have to understand when you get delusional sellers, don't take that first 30, 40% price drop like, oh, that's motivation. No, they were just delusional. Forget that. Figure out what the property is worth now. Try to factor it in and then make an offer that makes sense. And that's it. Now, time has definitely been on your side. Circumstances, that has to change on his side. Number 3, I promise you the market's punished him. I would also ask him, Mr. Seller, how many times have you been under contract with this property? I'm willing to guess multiple times, and people probably pulled out. I want to find out what the real problem with the property is. It's probably in rough condition. That's why it's not selling. Cash flow wise, if it was in good shape, it should sell 225 to 250 all day long. There's something wrong with this property, I promise you. Don't you agree? Jay, you got to find out what the story is on the property and why it's not selling. And that's the main ingredient. And this is the problem, is you got to suck that information out of the seller. So I would try to get past that initial conversation and just ask him how many times he had under contract. What is the real problem with this property? He knows what it is. The question is he going to tell you or not? Make sense? I think I lost Jay there, but you guys kind of get the understanding is you just can't, we can't make people sell us their house. So what's the next best cure? Time and circumstance. The only way that you can counteract that is by following up with them and being a good stewardess and just trying to be in their face when they make that decision. Because when they make that decision, it's usually very quick. You've already done it. Lucas says right. When the market speaks, it speaks. Usually after about 100, 120 days, the market's already told you. And guys, I also, on a property like this, I'm going to look at the market, and the market is smarter than you and me. So the market is a combination of thousands of people out there actively buying and selling. And when thousands of people, it's not good enough, heed the warning. And I always go back, Mr. Seller, what did the market tell you it's worth? Well, I think it's worth 200. That's funny. You haven't even got an offer above like 155 yet. Let me know when we can tell when we see what the house can afford. And that's when I just kind of go in with them. I let the market do most of the damage to these people. But keep in mind, some people aren't motivated. Now, this is a classic case where the seller is not quite motivated, but the property is probably very motivated. The property is probably tired. It needs a ton of repairs. He's probably super cheap, and that's why the property is not selling. Everybody knows it's going to cost time and money. And remember, money is a calculable number. Time is somewhat of a guess. And time is dependent on people's resources, how many people they have working for them, and what their levels of expertise in fixing up a property. So guys, keep in mind, I'm going to put this back up here. This is your cheat sheet to figure out how to calculate any type of repair cost. I know this isn't the sexiest video, but it's got to be done, and you got to understand it, because I'm like, how do I figure out the cost? If a property is worth $300,000 and it needs $100,000 in rehab, it doesn't mean it's worth $200,000. You have to figure out the time discount in it. The longer the time, the bigger the discount. Why? Time creates uncertainty. The longer it is, the longer the holding cost, and the more problems it'll create. Make sure you use this chart. It will help you in factoring your numbers. And guys, listen, when you have a delusional seller, these charts don't even work at all. The only thing that works on a delusional seller is time and circumstance. And when that happens, you understand how that works. So guys, if you want to spend more time and learn how to do this, go over to freewholesaling.com. Make sure you join us at Flip with Rick Plus. We're going to be in Dallas, April 24th, 25th. I'm going to be there all week. We're going to have a blast. If you're in Flip with Rick Plus, you already have a ticket, and you get to go to 2 events a year, and it's a lot of fun. We do one in Florida, and then we travel to one. This is our first traveling one, so it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you get on our waiting list if you want to get that done. And as usual, guys, if you got value from this video, do me a favor, do me a huge favor. Make sure that you smash that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so other people can find the truth on wholesaling, guys. I love this business. And the only way that we can grow it and prosper it is we share the word. We help out as many people as possible. My goal is to get you through your first wholesale deal, to get you to your first 5 deals, to get you 100 grand. Join me over at Flip with Rick Plus. We can partner up on deals. By the way, you can get in there for free by sending us a deal if we JV it together. Guys, let me know if today was of help. Make sure you subscribe to it. Give me a thumbs up. Guys, rehab costs. It's not my specialty, but you got to know it. Now you know it. You can refer back to this video. Let's concentrate on marketing to motivated sellers, connecting, building rapport, having amazing conversations. If you guys are in Flip with Rick, join me after this. I'll be over there in 5 minutes. We'll have a private conversation, answer more detailed questions you guys have on it. I appreciate you guys. Hopefully